Hi,
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. And you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. This is my student, Jalen Williams.
Hi.
So I appreciate your time. We have like a little studio here in my office now, and you can hear us okay?
Yeah, perfectly well.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to let Jalen ask the questions, but we are playing your Shell Adagio here next Thursday night. And this is the second or third time I've performed it with different groups over the last, I don't know, 7 to 8 years maybe. And I just love the piece. And so and I know it's probably been one of your bigger hits, I guess you could call it, for educational orchestras.
Yes, absolutely. It's been played, I don't know, hundreds of times.
Wow. Yeah.
Uh,
So can
so,
you tell us a little bit about your background for our audience, because we're going to be sharing part of your video with our audience at our
so,
concert.
well, I started to learn music when I was 3 years old, and I started to compose when I was about 6 or something like that. And I had my first pieces performed as a composer for orchestra when I was about 8 or 9 or so. Around that time, I can't, it's a long time ago. I can't remember. And for a while, I thought that I'll do a career both as a soloist, as a violinist, and also a composer, until I was in my late teens, 18, 20, and I noticed that there were only 24 hours a day, and it's not enough.
Wow. Yeah. And where are you from?
Well, I was born in Israel, but I grew up in Paris.
Oh, wow.
There's a French accent that
Yeah.
even with, now it's been over 30 years, 35 years that I'm in London.
Wow.
But I was already 17, 18 when I came to London, so too late for the accent.
Hmm.
My daughters have got a perfect English accent, but not me.
Well, you know that we're outside of Atlanta,
Yeah,
Georgia, and I'm at a new school this year. I was at Alpharetta for 6 years, and I think I had met you when I was there, and then now I'm starting at a new school this year. So it's gone really well, and I got fantastic students like Jalen, and so so I'm going to let Jalen ask a question maybe about the piece and.
Okay, okay. Basically, what was your inspiration behind this piece?
well, in general, whatever piece I write, inspiration as a word for me, inspiration is never outside music, in a sense. So I would say that it sounds really basic, but if I write a piece, let's say that I write at the moment, I'm writing a viola concerto, but let's say when I wrote my violin concerto, my idea was basically to write a concerto that would be as good as Mendelssohn or Beethoven's. So I always try to compare. So, but of course, it's not only that. I've got my language on. From when I was 5 or 6, when I was a young child, I thought that writing music is about writing something new. That is your own language. But if you're honest with yourself, it will probably come. But it's a work to find your own style. And my music not the Shell Adagio is not. It's a really old piece. It's 25 years ago or something like that. But now my music is as almost trademarks rhythm that only I write this type of rhythms, and you can recognize it that way. But if you want a little story about the Shell Adagio, there is one. It's actually not all pieces have a story, but that one has. It didn't start as that. It's a piece that didn't start as an orchestral piece. It was part of a piece that I call the Shell, that was for 7 players, and that was the second movement. Now, the first movement and the last movement what I didn't tell you, when I was young, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, when I started to compose, I started to compose, and I found when I was around 8 something that was, I thought that I invented, was my own way of writing with 12-tone techniques. And when I was told that Schoenberg had done it before me, I was very upset. I thought, oh, wow, that's such a pity. But in the shell, there were 3 movements, and the first movement and the third movement were more atonal and a lot more aggressive. And I thought when I was composing the piece that I needed a middle movement that was very peaceful. Now, so it started as a chamber music piece, and I was on, and that is almost funny, I was 21 or 22, and I did a retrospective concert in London, in a big hall in London. You know, when you are 22, you feel really old, but you're not in many ways. So it's funny. And in the concert, it was one of the pieces. There are all sorts of pieces, plus that piece that was called The Shell. And in the audience, there was a conductor. And after the concert, he contacted me, and he said, you know, I really like this piece, The Shell, and I'd like you I'd like to commission you to do a transcription for string orchestra of the slow movement. And I said, no way, the way that I wrote the piece is how it has to be. It couldn't be otherwise. And I was 20. And also sort of, I thought, you know, when you're a composer, or I think that if you're a real artist, you never do things for money. I mean, it doesn't mean that you want to be poor, but you will just not do it. You wouldn't sell your soul because it's, well, basically it's not worth it. You have only one soul, and if you wanted to make money, you would do something else. So, and I thought at that time that I was convinced, even if I'm a really good orchestrator, I've never had surprises. So, you know, if I write a piece for full orchestra and I come to the first rehearsal, I'm not surprised. It was like that for when I was 8 years old, and it's like that now. But I found that each instrument has got its own sounds, and that in general, pieces that I wrote for, let's say, I don't know, organ or something like that, they wouldn't work at transcription. So when the conductor asked me if I would transcribe, I thought, no, it's not going to work. But he was older than me. He was maybe at that point, I think he was 40, and he said, why don't you think about it? Which was the right way to to approach a 20-year-old that has said no to you. And I said to him, I said to him, look, I don't want to do it. If it's not good, it's not a matter of money. So why don't we do something? We have a contract. I will do the work. If I don't like it, I don't give it to you. You don't pay me. Nothing, but I don't give it to you. If I'm happy, then you pay me what we agree. He thought, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. That's a great philosophy for anyone in the arts too, to not do it just for the monetary gain, but you're an artist for a reason. You know, you're an artist for a reason.
A much better life in general if you do the right things. So it's not to be a hero or anything, but it's just I wouldn't. It felt uncomfortable to do anything else. And I was quite poor at that point. I was a young student. I lived in a small place. I remember when I was in my early 20s that I had to arrange to eat for something 50p that was half a pound, so about like $1 a day.
Mm.
So there was the temptation of money, but no. And and I did this transcription, and I was, and it went very well. And I thought that it became somehow another piece. And that's what is the Shell Adagio. After that, I think that it was an interesting turn for me, because this idea of that pieces could have different settings as it wasn't the first time that I had the experience that I managed to do it, and it stayed in my mind, and I think that I thought about it without knowing, it was part of my psyche for a while, and I think about 10 years ago, I started consciously to do to have works that have got different versions, but it's not like transcription. So when I was commissioned a concerto for saxophone, and the saxophone player wanted it for chamber orchestra, so double woodwind. And I remember sort of we were doing the contract for the commissioning, and I said to him, look, I think that I'd like to do something that is really interesting. I'll compose the concerto. The solo part will be the same, but I'll do two versions, one for chamber orchestra and one for string orchestra. And he became quite white, and he said, I can't pay twice. And I said, no, it's okay. That's my problem. It's just I find it interesting. It's a challenge. So that, it's more than a transcription. So I decided to give it not two different opuses, but one is opus, I think 71A, and the second is 71B, because they are really different works. And there was, even more recently, there was an example that is even more extreme. I was commissioned to write a piece, a lullaby. It was for a concert at Carnegie Hall, and I think that it was a connection between, there was a concert in Carnegie Hall and one in the big hall in Athens. And the people that commissioned me the work were quite open to ideas. And I said to them that what I like to do is to, from the start, compose the lullaby in two versions that would be as far as possible from one another. So solo piano and string quartet. And I don't think you get further apart than that, because the sound is just so different. I mean, you go from, I don't know, string quartet to full orchestra, not a big deal. It's a bit few more people, but piano to strings, it's quite something.
Yeah.
And after that, so I composed the two pieces. And after that, I had quite a few friends, because over the years, I think I have maybe around 2,000 musicians that have played my music. I mean, apart from in orchestra, sort of people in chamber music. And I had a few different groups that asked me if I could do a version for them. So that piece, the lullaby, now has got, I think, 7 versions. One for woodwind quintet. So, but I think that all this idea that it was feasible started with the shell Adagio. Because before, of course, I knew that Bach was doing that for all his music, but I thought that it didn't fit my music because it was quite specific. And I've changed my mind, so it was quite a pivotal piece, the shell Adagio. There is also something else that may be interesting for you to know, is that I think that it was the first piece that had something very clearly tonal in my music.
Okay.
And for me, there was never a very big difference between tonal or atonal, because as I said, I wrote atonal music when I was 7 years old. And for me, it's more about not tonality or not tonality, it's about whether there are melodies or not. Because you can do amazing melodies that are atonal. I think the problem is because the melodies are like the story in a book. You don't have a story, I think that it doesn't quite work. And so but because for me it was always so important to write something that was new, it took me a long time to find a way to incorporate another way of tonality in my music. And the shell Adagio is the first one, where in this case, this middle movement was in contrast with the two outer movements. Mm-hmm. But in more recent music, it's happening at the same time. It has a lot of different things.
Yeah, the opening is pretty tonal, and then that middle section it gets it goes way, and so for us as we're learning it, and my students are kind of, some of them first time discovering atonal music, it takes a while for their ears to adjust. So,
how your ensemble?
we have 36 in this chamber orchestra, and but
So
yeah.
something like 7 or 8 first violins on going.
There's 10, 10. We're a little short on violas. I think we have 6 or 7. We have more than 4.
Oh.
6 or 8, and then I think about 7 or 8 cellos, and then 3 basses. So it's pretty well balanced. Could use a few more violas, but it's pretty well balanced overall. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And we have about 158, 160 in the orchestra program here at the school in 3 different classes, 3 orchestras. So,
wow.
Yeah. We're growing. We're going to be growing for sure.
Next week I'm going to record a CD of my music for string orchestra in Germany as a conductor, and there are 2 pieces that have something in common with the shell Adagio. Is that they are not very difficult, but in the shell Adagio it was just by chance because it was a slow movement.
Mm-hmm.
But these pieces that I'm recording, I wrote them when I was composer in residence of a youth orchestra.
Great.
So when you were telling me that you were playing the shell Adagio, I thought, oh, it's funny. I was thinking about the pieces, the differences between, because I think there's about 15 years gap between the shell Adagio and maybe 12 years gap, and they are quite different.
Wow. Yeah, and the world needs a lot more great music for educational orchestras, for younger orchestras. And so this is a prime example of that.
It's difficult to write things that are simple and beautiful.
Yes.
It's not, the more material and chances. It's why actually there's nothing more difficult than writing a piece for violin solo, for example. Mm-hmm. It's as hard as it gets. I mean, it's a lot easier to write a full opera.
Wow.
By a long way, I think. That's why Bach is the only one that more or less to have succeeded. Yeah. In my life, I wrote a few pieces for solo. I wrote a couple of pieces for solo violin and 1 piece for solo cello. On the piece for solo cello, I remember the cellist. He used to be at that time. He was the cellist of the Kronos Quartet in the States.
Uh-huh.
And he pursued me for 2 years. He said, "Oh, come on, you can write me a piece for solo cello." And I would try to avoid him in some way. And then I thought, no, if Bach managed to do it, I should sort of be courageous. But it doesn't get harder than that. So in some ways, the pieces for education or that are easy enough to be played by groups like that are very, very difficult to write.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Borenstein, we really appreciate your time, and we're so thankful that you've taken the time out to talk to us. Jalen, do you have any more questions?
If you could describe the texture of the song, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Thank you. I think that for me, in string playing, because maybe I'm a violinist, I think that vibrato is very important. It plays an essential role in what you can do. And actually, sort of, I'm quite at odds with some tradition. I don't think that you should play Bach without vibrato, for example. I think that it doesn't make any sense because it's removing one of the possibilities of how you can express things. It doesn't mean that you need to play it like Brahms or something like that. That not at all. But there are different ways. I think that so there's at the beginning of the shell Adagio, there's a warm sound, but at the same time, it's very remote. It's wide. It's the type of modernity that you wouldn't find earlier, even if it's simple notes, but it's got this type of really from far away. So it's a little bit like if you were trying to perform, don't know, something like Debussy or Stravinsky, but with a sound that is more akin to Brahms in some way, at the beginning, at least, of the piece. I remember some groups used to play some of the middle sections a bit like Baroque in terms of bow, and I don't like it. I slow it by 2, but it's not ta da ta da ta da. It's a ta da da da. It's a different feel. It's not Baroque. So I'm not really sure if it answers your question, but it's. I like to have some depth in the sound, whether it's sort of warm or if it's dark, but that it's not in this piece at least.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a video of it so I can see it.
Yes, we're going to make a video. We're going to be using some of it on our clips, and we may even put this on our podcast. We have an orchestra podcast here too. So I'll be sure to send you the links.
Wonderful.
Put online, but we appreciate you very much and taking the time out. I know Jalen, we're all excited about the piece, and this is one that's kind of really starting to capture them and make a lot more sense to them as we continue to learn and explore it. So
wonderful. So
yeah.
Forward to hearing it when you've played it.
Yes, I can definitely get that to you as well.
Well, have a nice morning for you. For me, it's afternoon already.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye now.